Hello guys, I'm Super Ron, welcome back to the channel, and we're back at Autoshack and back on the Caddy Showcar build. Over the last few weeks we've been mocking this up with an engine conversion, air ride suspension and lots of other bits around the car, and we've been building it all up in the mock-up stage. This is really important to us because the last thing you want to do is assume everything is okay, paint the bay, get it in, and then realise you have to weld a bracket on or you want to cut something off or move it. So this is what we do with all our builds. We completely do a dry run, and now I think we are to the stage of just about having everything chopped out, everything welded in that we need. We've got the intercooler mounted, we've got the radiators mounted, we've got all the new fuel system mounted, we've got all the chassis notches done, we've got everything welded up underneath. So now is the time we strip it all back down to a bare shell. We're going to weld up all the rest of the holes in the engine bay to get this completely smooth, and then paint the engine bay. We're going to wire wheel underneath and reseal and stone chip that. So in today's episode, we're going to drop everything out, all the suspension, all the 4-link we put on the back, start from fresh, and while the engine's out, we're going to be painting that up, painting all the inlet, the gearbox, the block, getting everything pristine and looking like new, and then it'll be ready for the final fit for everything to go back together. So there's been lots of work in the bay. We cut out the battery tray, so that is now all gone. And this is why we do the dry run. You see where I welded on the horn on the back side there? So if we'd have painted it, that had all peeled off the paint. The same with the throttle pedal at the back there. You can see where I welded that on from the inside, and where I welded the tabs on for the wiring looms on the other side as well. All of that just needs the top knocked off it, and then that'll be super smooth and metal finished, just like the battery tray went. We've got all the brackets welded on for the intercooler, so they're all underneath. We've got the reinforcement for the front panel, so that's all on, can be painted. Just before we drop this out, there's just a couple more things we need to address. And the first one is the brakes. Because obviously with all this new power, we're going to be upgrading the brakes all round. So this little baby servo and master cylinder, which was designed for the little 1.6 solid front discs and rear drums, is not going to be man enough for our big brake setup. So a common thing to do on these is to fit a GTI setup, which does mean a bigger servo. So we have got a big 9-inch servo off a GTI, but I just want to try it on because I have seen some problems hitting the inlet on a 20-valve turbo. So while the engine's still in, and while it's still in the place where we've put it, I want to try this servo on just to see if it fits. The other thing we need to look into is we've got the airflow meter that needs to come through here, and it is going to be a bit tight with this cap on here. So we might be putting a standard cap on. The other thing we can do is if we take this off, we've got a lot of room to move this forward and down. So we can have the airflow meter sitting there and then the air filter out here. And all we need to do for that is just trim this a little bit more to allow that to come forwards. So obviously in a Mark IV, that's more over here, but they haven't got a brake servo there. And then one last thing we need to mount in the car is the selector for the gearbox. Because we're going from a rod shift to the Mark III cable shift with the gearbox, we need to mount this in the car. So it's a bit tricky on a Mark I because they have a really small center console, so you can't just bolt this on the top because this will stick out. So we just need to do a few little mods to the top, so we'll do that. Because I'm going to chop a bit of the tunnel to get this to mount, I don't want to stone chip everything underneath and then mount this and cut up all my work. So again, the final stages of the mock-up. Right, we've just had another delivery come through. Something that has been worrying people on this build. We've got a shallow sump, because on the Mark I, these do hang down very low, as you can see. Now we've got the splitter on, it's not quite so bad, because you'll hit that and that'll give you a bit of a warning, but if you're driving along, it'll already be too late. So the shallow sump fixes two things. It hangs down at the back here on the standard one. So this is the real low vulnerable bit, and this is cast aluminium. So if you'd have watched my golf video, you'll know what happens when something hits cast aluminium, because I actually cracked mine all around here. So with this shallow sump, it is a two-piece and has a tin bottom. So if in the unfortunate event that you do hit this, it won't crack, it'll just bend in a bit. So this comes as a full kit from ECS. It comes with a new shorter strainer, all the bolts, all the gaskets, everything you need, even the sealer to go around the edge. and it comes with this adapter. I'm not sure what these are off, but they do have a turbo drain on the back, but as you can see, it is at an angle of 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock. But on the 1.8 turbo, it's straight up and down. So it's this flange here, you can see it's 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. So what they've made is this super cool little adapter to spin it around. So that sits in there and then gives you a 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And we've got all the gaskets to go on there. So just for a bit of a comparison, you can see this is the bottom bolt hole where it bolts onto the bell housing, and the sump is way up higher than that. We go over to the current one, here is that same bolt, and you've got all this sump all the way back here, look, underneath. So we're going to be right up in line with this bolt hole, straight along there. That's going to gain us a lot of room. The only thing it doesn't have is the level sensor in the tin sump, but that doesn't matter because we're not using that anyway. That's for the TT. Hopefully that'll put some people's minds at rest. We'll get that on when we strip down the engine. Let's get these brake lines off and then get the master cylinder off and see if this big boy will fit in there. We will be remaking all these so they kind of swoop in a bit nicer. So they'll all be going. And off. I could have just cut the lines because we are making all new lines, but that's not what we're all about. So we've got that off. Now get to the servo. And the servo off. They just have a little clevis pin at the back. Through there with a little clip on it. All right, let's try this big boy on. We are all good. So the bit of red some people run into problems with is the turbo here hitting this. But as you can see, we've got a nice lot of room for there, so that's not a problem. And that'll just give a lot better braking force, or a lot better assist with the bigger braking force. And you can see there the size difference between the two. So that's another tick. So I'll put that back on and we'll work out if we can fit the airflow meter and everything around here. Right, so I've got the master cylinder back on. It should sit in the same place because it bolts straight through. So I've just got an airflow meter here without the sensor in, but this will be fine for mock-up purposes. Arrow in, and then we've got this max power filter. We'll probably get a nice ITG foam one, but this will do for mock-up purposes. I think that'll sit in there quite nice. So you can see it now clears all of that. The sensor can sit over here. We're not sitting too high in the bay, which is the same as everything else. So that'll work out nicely. The other thing I saw that might be a problem is our outlet for the water pipe. So we've got this one here, which goes straight into there. Less than ideal, but I think we could probably get a 90 and loop that around. Then that one's got to go to our radiator top pipe. That's the return, just bleed it all out. I think that's going to be a-okay. We've got our vacuum we made up and modified for the servo. That'll still be in the same place and work. So I think the only thing we've got to do is just work around our cover to get that to fit round our intake pipe. Right, let's try this on. This part is purely for cosmetics. We don't actually need the cover on, and this can sit anywhere. But as it is a show car, we want everything to fit perfect and factory. So I think if I just zip a bit up there, we can have this sitting over nicely. And that also kind of covers up the gear linkage underneath. So if we give it a little snip there, that should clear perfect. Ah, that is perfect. We're down on our 3 points and we are all clear here. So I'll neaten that up a bit to get a nice swoop so it matches. That is another one ticked. And just checking clearances under there. And we've got loads of room, so no trouble there. And to the top of the cover, because we lowered the engine down, we've got a nice lot of clearance everywhere. Perfect. So I'm happy all this area is now going to work. It didn't take a lot, but it's just one of those things. It could have been a lot of work and we wouldn't want to do that once the bay is painted, especially if we got the servo and the linkage all powder coated up and then had to modify something. So I'm happy with that. So let's have a look at this gear linkage. Right, on to the shifter. So as standard, these have rod shift, so we can pull this all out. So they just have an actual rod linkage going to the front to the old gearbox. And they have all this plate and everything that bolts in here. We're ditching all that because we are going to cable shift. So when you move that, cables go in and out, but cable shift was never designed for a Mark 1. So you can just bolt these on top. You've got your nice linkage, but then you've got cables inside, so you have to cut the bulkhead for it to go through. And also then, the centre console doesn't cover it. So if you've just got a stripped out track car, that is the best option. But to get the interior to fit in, you have to load this up from the bottom. Like so. But if you just put them directly underneath like this, your gear stick is only this big compared to the standard one up here. So I like to come to a little bit of a compromise, cut this out a bit bigger. So this can suck up, the cables then stay on the outside of the car to run to the front, and the interior will still go back in. And then get our template, because we have done this before. All right, here are our templates. I think one was for a Mark 1 and one for a Mark 2, I think, I can't remember. That sits. I think this one sits down there. So this is if you want the cables in the car. This is the one. This is if you want the cables outside the car. So we've just got to cut the hole in the floor that big. That leaves the cables in the tunnel. And then as you can see, the centre console on these aren't very thick at all. So then that covers over and sits in the factory position. So this is our template. Let's get chopping. I just cleaned up all the insulation off around our little Mark 1 hole. We've got our lines where our shifter was, so we want that in about the same place. I reckon we'll go here. I think for this one, we'll get the plasma out. That'll just make cutting in the corners much easier. And all out. The sound deadening was getting a little bit warm there, so I just took that out. Let's tidy up the edges and try our shifter in. And put it up in place. And our console should still fit. Ooh, boom, boom. Super. Right, let's work on mounting points. And then underneath, I've just drilled up through in line. So we've got the bolts in, and then I'll just put a little bit of tube in there so they can be done up tight. But we've still got a nice sort of room for the exhaust to pass around beside it. And then coming forwards, got the cables that go up there. Usually try and P-clip them right over that side, and then the exhaust goes down the middle. I couldn't find any round tube, so we've got some square tube. They measured 45 on the front, 35 on the back. So let's put these in and we can do it all up tight. And that is all on. So that's on there solid, not going anywhere. I'll trim these down. So then we'll still have room for the exhaust to run down beside it and kind of swoop around. So that is good. Let's go and have a look at it from the top. And there it is. All in, 5 speeds and reverse. And it's in there solid, so it's not going to wiggle around. The only thing now is we've got this kind of unfinished gap around. It's not too bad. So obviously in an ideal world, we could get a bit of Mark 3 tunnel and weld that in, then it would be a complete perfect fit for everything to sit in there. But this is what we've got. So we've cut that out, and what we normally do is on the final fit, we just put a bit of sealer just all the way around the outside, just to keep it watertight, airtight, so no fumes or anything come in. And that seems to do all right. So we'll stone chip it all underneath, reseal it all, and then on the final fit, just run a bead of sealer round the inside, and that'll seal all this in. Sit on there, so it'll look just like factory. So that is another chop and fabrication bit finished. So with those last couple of points addressed, I think it's now time for the big strip down. So we'll drop the engine out, drop all the rear suspension off, drop all the front suspension off, basically get it down to a bare shell, and then I can finish off all the welding in the engine bay, finish off that notch that we started on the other side for the boost pipe, weld up any random holes in here, and then get the bay ready for painting. So all this work we've been doing the last month or so, it's time to undo it. Something I just have thought of before we take the legs off is work out where the braided line's going to go into the bottom of the bag. These then join onto the plastic lines that run to the car, to the manifold. But we want to get these, and we probably will run them through the car, so we'll make a little hole through there. So I'll just have a little think about that. So there's a little hole in the bottom of the bag there, and that's where the air goes in and out. And then we just have our threaded line in there, and then we've got to work out where the other end is going to sit to join the line. Got the bag on at the back, and then we've got a P-clip to hold it there. And it's what you got to make sure it doesn't go tight on lock either way, which this is all good. Even there, we've still got slack, so that's in a good place. And the other thing, because we've got travel going up and down, need to make sure still got plenty of slack when it's up. And even though we can't turn when the wheels are right down, got slack when it's all the way up. So we'll P-clip this down, and then we'll just drill a hole through here and then run this along the inside. And I made sure we were inside the chassis leg here, because you don't want to drill through and have the screw sticking out on the other side. So we're all good here. That screw comes out in the middle of there. And there's the hole drilled. And then what I did from the inside is bash out a bit of an egg along here. So this bit is out and that bit is in. And that just makes it nicer when it slots in on the angle. That sits in there nice and tight. And then on final install, we'll just put a lot of seal around there. And that's where it will sit. And then on the inside, we can attach that just down there, and then that will disappear under the sound deadening under the carpet. The reason I put that egg in, otherwise if it comes in at 90 degrees, it's going to be sticking out like that. Whereas bashing it in a little groove, that sits in a nice little trough, and then the plastic lines will go onto this. Alright, legs are off, shafts are out, bottom engine mounts are off, looms out. We should be ready just to drop it out. Undo the mounts. And this is tricky again, where we've got to lower it down, gearbox end first, scoot it over that way, because the cam pulleys don't clear up here. Take the weight a bit. So that end out. There's that side out. And we're free. Nice. Then lift it off. Out it comes. There it is, all back out again. So now we can get this up on the engine stand and start stripping everything down, ready for painting. Get it all shiny and nice. And we have got a nice empty bay. You can see now where I ran the fuel lines up and how they come up. So they're all attached, just like we did underneath there and there. So this is where they run from factory. You can see my two new holes where I'm running the wiring looms all hidden under there. There to replace them ones. But But I made sure I kept the hole that I cut out. Hopefully they'll weld back in them holes. And obviously we've got a lot of unused holes up here. We've got a bad clutch repair where they rip through with the clutch pedal. So that'll all be going because we're going hydraulic clutch. But overall, there's not that many holes to weld up. We've got a couple of ones on the top of the leg, one up there. Other than that, there's not going to be many repairs. So let's get this box off and get this on the stand. There it is, all on the stand. That's going to make it a lot easier to work with. So we've still got our cam belt and everything to do because we've got to convert it to the Mk1 compatible cam belt because of the engine mount. We've got the shallow sump to go on as well. And then it's just going to be a big cleanup. All of this is going to get painted. We'll sort all this out, paint all that up and get it all looking fresh. There's the gearbox all off. Now the eagle-eyed viewers amongst us that have been following the build may have noticed I've just fitted an O2A gearbox shifter when we've been working with an O2J. And that's because this was only a mock-up gearbox. This is just a beaten up one we got laying around. Here is the gearbox that has just turned up, which we'll actually be using. It's an O2A out of a Mark III Golf. So that'll be perfect for what we want. So that's why we went to the O2A shifter. They're just a little bit different how they connect here. See, the bolt-on ends and the tower's a bit different. Whereas on this one, this is a later gearbox that's all on ball joints and the reverse light is down there. So we're going to get this refreshed up and then we'll tidy this up and paint all this up as well. We've got a new clutch flywheel and everything to go on. So let's carry on stripping down. I think I'll get the fuel system all off, so we'll get all that out of the way. Get the brake bar off as well. Take the rack out, then we've got the last few fuel lines, and that'll be the bay completely empty, ready for some work. So next up on the strip down is going to be getting all the fuel system back out. So we dry fitted that, got everything mounted, swell pot, the lift pump, everything is in its places, all the holes are drilled. It goes everywhere we want it to go, so we can take all that off, drop the tank down, and then take off all the 4-link setup we put on and all the rear air rides. So we'll get all that off, everything unbolts, nothing's welded on, and then it's going to be a wire wheel under here. It is in very good condition. All this is just flaky sealer underneath. Is actually all right. So we're not going to take the whole lot off because the factory sealer is doing its job and it's all very good condition. So we'll just get where it's gone flaky on the edges, wire wheel that off and give this all a stone chip under here. That's the drums all off. Both sides. Won't be needing them where we're going. Watts linkage and rear bags off. And all off. We've got all the rear suspension off, all the A-arms, all the 4-link, the rear beams off, tank, all the lines, pressure regulator, rear shackles. You can see, remember where we moved the beam over, that's how much we moved it over each side. So I've got to finish welding that. And that is the bay completely emptied. Everything that bolts off has been bolted off and we're left with a completely blank canvas. Got all the pedal box, all the brake linkage, steering rack, heater box, all the rest of the cables. So now we can clean it up and mark up what holes we want to keep and what needs to go. And here is the beam all welded up. So I've got some nice big welds on there now. Nice and strong. That is definitely not going anywhere. So now that's all secure on. And also I welded on the Watts linkage bracket. It used to be held on just by a bolt. But as we're welding, I thought I'd weld that on. So I've got a nice bead all the way around there. That is definitely not going anywhere now. So that is nicely welded on. Much better than the welds before, if you remember. And we're getting a collection of bits ready for the powder coaters. These are all going to be shot blasted and then powder coated gloss black. I just chopped the arm off the top of the beam. That was for the auto leveler because we're well out of range for that, so we won't be using that. So we've got the beam ready to go. We've got all the brake linkage and brake bar and servo mount. That's all ready. I took all the ball joints out at the end of the arms, and then these were already on poly bushes, so they'll pop off and you can reuse them. Got the clamps for the back of the arms. I've pressed the wheel bearings out so we can do the hubs. Got the fuel tank straps, so they're all going to look as good as new, all in gloss black. And then that will match all the TA Technics rear arms, which are gloss black as well, and all the struts. We're going to ask them if they can do the tank, but we're not too sure about that one, because if they shot blast it, we don't really want it filling up with shot. So we might just clean that up and paint that ourselves. Everything else is either already powder coated or we'll paint it up. So I think that's all we've got going to powder coat. I've given the bay a good clean up. I've got some thinners and cleaned all that up much better now. So you can see how good condition it all is. Most of the bay is just going to require a little scotch over and it'll be ready for paint. So I've been through and marked which ones we want to keep. So we've got the brake pedal, got the steering arm, got 2 for the looms, got brake servo, heater matrix. We want to keep one of these holes here for the heater matrix cable. And then we want to keep these little pegs because they'll be for the brake lines. Another one there. Got my riv nuts for the fuel lines. We want to keep them. But apart from that, all these tabs and all the extra holes will all be going. So luckily there's no rust in here. All the stuff on the front panel and that will just sand off. That's just purely cosmetic. And then weld up all the holes. And then once that's all taken care of, it'll be going for a big dose of white in the oven. Something else to go on the powder coating pile. Also got the drive shafts. So I've just took the CVs off. We'll get new boots for them. And then these will be gloss black as well. So we'll add them to our powder coat pile. I've also put the bonnet stay down there, so that's looking nice and fresh. Found another couple of covers, steering rack mounts. And we're also, as we're going full stealth, we're going to do the intercooler and radiator gloss black as well. So they'll all be done together. Got the engine on the stand, ready for a strip down and clean up. So we found a little bit of an oversight on the gearbox, and it's because it is from a VR6. So this was our mock-up one. And if you look just here and here is the top mounting points that go on the block. And look how close that is to the drive shaft here. Whereas if you look at this one, the top mounting bolts are here, and look how far that is from the drive shaft. So the bell housing on the VR6s must be clocked around, so we need a 4-cylinder gearbox to go on. And with a bit of YouTube magic, we have now swapped that VR6 box for a 4-cylinder O2A out of a Mark IV. So you can see now we've got our bell housing pattern back the same as our mock-up gearbox, so that's going to go straight on. This came off a 20 valve turbo. So we know for sure that it's going to bolt on. It's the O2A, so it's got the same gear linkage that will just put the shifter and everything in the tunnel. This is straight out of a Mark IV, and you can see the Mark IV engine mounts. Because remember, when we fitted the conversion mount, we had to drill through. And I said because the Mark IVs bolt on the end. So here's our ears, and you can see the mount bolts through here, and it's threaded in here. Whereas our conversion mount goes over. On the Mark IV, it actually uses 4 bolt holes. So we've got this one and this one on the ears that we're using. Then you've got another one down here. And you've even got another brace on the back. So that is quite substantial. But for our little Mark I, all we're using is the ears on the front. And that'll do the job nicely. So we're going to send this one off for a refresh. Just get all the seals changed, get it checked out inside, and that'll be ready to go on our engine. But the car is all ready to start on the bodywork. So for some, this might seem a massive step backwards, taking all the work we've already done out and apart. But this is all part of the process. So now I know when the engine goes back in, I'm not going to have to modify anything. We can get all this bay smoothed, painted, and everything will bolt straight back in to its locations. No faffing around, no chance of scratching anything. And it's just such a more efficient, everything is ready, it will go straight in and be done. So I think that is going to wrap this episode up here. In the next episode, we're going to be diving into the engine bay. I'm going to be getting Mr. Wing out, welding up all these holes, and then I'll wheel it over to Lee, and he can paint all the engine bay a super fresh white. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you give it a like. You guys are still tuning in every episode and it makes it so much more enjoyable for me to do, knowing that you guys are enjoying it as well. We've got the full Caddy build in a playlist, so if you're only stumbling across this now, you can go back to episode 1, catch up to current progress, and be all set for next week. So until then, make sure you have fun.